to the cloud. There we go. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Trina. We were talking about why boundaries are important for the empath. So I'm going to sign the time over to you.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Welcome, everybody. This is my favorite topic. I'll go into a little bit about myself, but many of you heard it last week, and so I'll give you the abridged version. A little over 2 years ago, I was literally dying of MS, multiple autoimmunes. I was in a wheelchair, 180 plus pounds heavier, and honestly would not be sitting here today if I had not decided I wanted to live, took some steps towards it, and then had my awakening. And in that process, guides gave me a lot of advice for everything from energy healing to practical matters, but most importantly, to what it takes in order to heal myself and then teach that to other people. Last week, I did a class on shadow work, which is a big part of that process in order to heal. But what I'm talking about today is not just for empaths. It's for everybody, and it's about boundary setting. And the reason that this is so important, and again, one of my favorite topics, is because I struggled with it immensely myself. As a child, we're not given the ability to make boundaries. We are told, you know, the parent is always right. Listen to what I say. And a lot of children aren't even free to express their own emotion at all because the parents will take that as an attack or, you know, being disrespectful. And so we hit our adulthood with no idea how to stay true to ourselves, how to express our needs in a healthy way. And very often then when they get trampled on because we haven't expressed them, we get angry in response. And then we overset boundaries as we're trying to learn how this works. Now, I really consider this part of my empath series, though, because the reason this is so important for an empath is because we are prone to codependency. And the reason we are prone to codependency is because we crave harmony, because we feel when that harmony is disturbed and disjointed. And so for the empath, it's literally painful to interact with people and have them upset with us. And when you set boundaries, people will be upset with you. But again, this is something I consider a very important piece of it, is although they will be upset with you, it actually benefits them as well. And the reason it benefits them as well is because in most cases, these are people who do care about you, but they don't know how to express how they care about you in the way that helps you. And so if you can't express your boundaries, you're both miscommunicating and misunderstanding each other when you think you're sacrificing and giving up and everything else to just keep the peace and make them happy. But it builds resentments. And boundaries tell the people how they can best show up for you. Now, again, especially if you were someone who didn't have a boundary, you're likely to get a negative reaction. But part of why that is actually a good thing is because it tests your boundary. It helps you readjust to see if maybe you did overset a boundary and you overreacted, which I'll use an example for. But more importantly, it allows you to reaffirm to yourself, no, I'm going to take care of myself and I'm going to stay true to my boundary. And the universe has to test that because you need to know. And it's not necessarily that the person is trying to trample on them, but just like the kid that you say no to, the first time you make a rule, they're going to test it to see if you really are committed to that rule. And everybody does that as a thing. So boundary setting. The first thing that I like to make sure people are aware is you can't set a boundary for someone else. Your boundary is never, they are not allowed to, they have to. But what it is how you will react if they do that. Example I like to use is there was a couple we were working with, and she said, you're not allowed to walk around without your shirt on. And That is not a healthy boundary, because he, having the same body autonomy that she wants, can do whatever he wants. A healthy boundary would be, if you walk around without your shirt on, I won't be seen with you. I'm not going. It's something she could control. When you first start setting boundaries, one of the big things is you will feel like you are overreaching, because if you have always given of yourself and given of yourself, but not put your own self into the equation, you feel very selfish when you start to ask for things for yourself. But the counter side of that is the baby with the bathwater. You know, if you cook meals every night and your partner leaves their dishes out and you're tired of having to clean up after them, and you say, you leave your dishes out again, I'm leaving you. Are you really going to stick to that? And is that really the kind of, balance that you want? A more reasonable boundary would be, if you leave your dishes out again, I'm not cooking dinner for you. I won't cook dinner for you until you learn to put your dishes away. Things like that, so that they know where to meet you and what your needs are. Now, the tendency to codependency, and the reason this goes with boundaries is because boundaries are how you separate your needs and your desires from the collective you have with the person. It's not just your romantic partner. I have had horrid codependencies with my children because I saw myself just as mom and not as my own autonomous being. My happiness was completely rooted in whether my kids seemed happy or not. And I say seemed because honestly, I was surface looking. I wasn't even looking at their long-term happiness. Were they seeming okay in this moment? Because again, when you have empathy, it hurts you when they seem to not be happy. But you can have codependency with your parents. You can have it at your job. Any place where you are giving up your true self to make others happy is how you get into that codependency trap. Again, huge with empaths and dangerous for empaths. That's how we are what I call the unhealed empath. And the unhealed empath is where most of us that have empathy, well, everybody does to some degree have empathy, and anyone can be an empath too. I fully believe that. But some of us are more naturally sensitive to the empathy. And so what will happen is we will tell ourselves, you know what, it's not a big deal. And example that I use when I do couples counseling stuff, but it's very relevant in this, is say a woman thinks to herself, you know what, I'm in the mood for some chocolate cake. That sounds really good. She turns to her husband and says, you know what, I'm in the mood for cake. Sure, let's go to the bakery and get a cake. Walk in the bakery. The husband looks around and goes, oh, that carrot cake is beautiful. Now, at least the way I was, again, codependent, and many empaths are prone to this, would say, you know what? I was thinking chocolate cake, but carrot cake's okay. I like carrot cake too. And so you never say anything and you get the carrot cake. You guys enjoy it. But after like the third or fourth carrot cake, you start to go, you know, why doesn't he ever get the chocolate cake that I want? And you start to build resentments. And the thing is he never had the chance to show up for you the way you wanted him to, because he didn't know what you wanted. And that is one of the problems of codependence, is we try to assume what we think will make the other person happiest rather than letting them tell us. You know, if she would have turned around and said, you know what, I had my heart set on chocolate cake, there's a good chance that he would have wanted chocolate cake, or the compromise. Well, let's get carrot cake this time, and next time we'll get chocolate cake. And that is the kind of thing that builds a healthy relationship, again, whether romantic or not. But our assumption that we can control the other person's happiness by just giving in, by just doing what we think will make them happy, robs us of our own being and our own power, because we're giving it away. Because then our mood and our happiness is dependent on that other person seeming grateful and reciprocating our sacrifices that we were never asked to make in the first place anyway. So when you're boundary setting, one of the first parts is figure out what you actually want. Most of us, and I was very guilty of this, had no idea who I was, what I actually wanted when I took other people out of the equation, because I had never taken there was always somebody else in the equation, and I had to sit there and go, take my partner, my kids, take everybody out of it. What does Trina want? And sit there, and it will feel selfish to think about yourself without anyone else in the equation. Now, that doesn't mean you don't consider other people, but you don't consider them when you're reaching to find out what it is you truly want. First, find out where you are. Then you can see where you would compromise, won't compromise, whatever, to make it work. But if you don't know what you really want, you don't even know if you're compromising, because you might think, I'm compromising because this doesn't feel whatever. But if you actually stopped and consider it, maybe you would have agreed with them, but you don't even know where your true compass is until you take everybody else out of it and think, what is it that you want? And once you do, then you sit there and say, how can I meet those needs? And that's where the boundaries come in. If you have somebody, example I use for the mirror trick in my shadow work thing is a mom asking, you to do something at a time that's horribly inconvenient for you. Many of us have codependency with our parents. We don't want to upset them. So even though we say this is a really inconvenient time for me, and then we get mad at our mom for not respecting, our time, you realize you're not respecting your time because you're not setting a boundary with your mom to tell her when is convenient for you. So a healthy boundary is you acknowledge the other person and what you are perceiving their side and needs to be. And I would say, it seems to me that this is what you're saying. I want to make sure I have that clear. And then tell them what your needs, where you're willing to meet them and where you're not. And like in the case of your mom, I am really, really busy, Mom, but I know this is important to you. Can we do it over the weekend? Give her the chance to meet that, and people will rise up and surprise you. Fear is a big reason why we don't set boundaries. What if we're not important enough to this person for them to be okay with the fact that I'm not making this easier on you? We don't have to belittle ourselves and our own needs and put those limits to hope other people like us. Because guess what? If they can't put up with your boundaries and they're not okay with it, they don't need to be in your life. And I know that sounds harsh, but the people who care will rise to meet them. And it may not be instant. You may have storming off in a huff and need a couple days of whatever for them to accept that you are developing yourself and that you are being true to yourself. But as long as you do it in a kind, communicating way, not yelling, screaming, no, don't you dare leave your dishes out again. Say, after I work hard at cooking, I'm not up to cleaning the dishes too. So if you don't put your dishes in the sink, I'm not cooking for you anymore. But you acknowledge their part. You let them know where you are. You see where they are and you communicate that, and it helps immensely. But those boundaries are going to feel like you are being selfish in the beginning, particularly if you were incredibly codependent. Obviously, there's different stages. I like to touch on the different types of empath, actually. It's not different points of empath, I guess, but I have categories that I personally use. The unhealed empath, where most of us start, we feel everything around us. We know the words coming out of people's mouth is not matching what we feel coming out of their energy and their heart. And it makes it really, really hard to navigate the world. We feel that we have to shield ourselves from everything. And then by working through your own shadows, by learning how to set boundaries, you reach the point of being a healed empath, bless you. You end up becoming a healed empath. And a healed empath is able to show up for the people they're working with, but they don't need to shield from the negative because you're not taking it into yourself anymore. You're helping them transmute it into healthier emotions. And it is where a lot of the healing and everything helps, and where you can help other people. It takes a lot of work and clearing your lens and stuff. So you're not putting your traumas on other people, which actually, I believe it's the next class I'll go into with, safe space, and clearing your lens is a very important part of that, because the last thing you want to do is help somebody and put your own traumas on their problems. But the last, and this has been occasionally unpopular when I've discussed it online with some people, but I do fully believe that narcissists are also empaths. Narcissists are unhealed empaths that, in order to protect their little hurt, traumatized child, go so in the opposite direction. Think, throw the baby out with the bathwater. They use that ability to read people, to manipulate people, to continually validate themselves, because that wounding was so dramatic that they need constant outside validation to feel okay about themselves. But the root is still an empath. All of us go through the boundary setting issue. As I said, it's not just something that I feel is very important for people on the spiritual path, but actually everybody. We are not taught how to have boundaries. I mean, how many of us were little kids with an aunt that stunk of Jean Naté and, was like scary, that we had to let hug us? She was allowed to smooth, no body autonomy. No, you couldn't have boundaries. Well, she's family and you have to do it. Well, what does this teach us as we grow up and become adults? That we just have to let other people do what they want. As long as they're happy, I'll be happy. Happy wife, happy life. It's not true. I mean, it's important that you show up for your partner, but if you're not happy, it works in reverse. And we take ourselves out of the equation and go, as long as everybody else is okay, so am I. It only lasts so long as you start to build resentments, because at some point you're going to realize, this is not how I wanted my life to turn out. In fact, this is not who I thought I'd be. You realize we put masks on for everyone around us. We're a different person at work. We're a different person in this video game. We're a different person with our parents that we are at parent-teacher conferences. We really don't even know who we usually are. And that's why that first step of boundary setting is take everybody out of it and try to figure out what you want. And here's the best part, you're not committed to it. That what you want and who you realize you are will continuously evolve as you grow and heal. When I first started the healing process, there was a lot of hands-on energy work healing, very Reiki for, not that I had learned Reiki, but it's a very similar practice that my guides taught me. I thought I was going to go around touch healing everybody. Now it actually ascension and wellness coaching, divine union, couples counseling, because I awoke with my partner and we've been navigating this together. But who you realize you are will continuously evolve, and your dreams will evolve, and all the limits you put on yourself get lifted as you learn the two, I would call them pillars of the healing, which is the shadow work to heal the emotional body and to remove the traumas that are causing your autopilots to be programmed, and then setting boundaries so that you don't incur new traumas by giving up so much of yourself and never discovering who you really are. I want to emphasize again, overreaching is one of the first traps that many of us fall in when we first start boundaries, because you start to feel a little better about yourself. And then the affront, which could just, not that they necessarily even know they're, offending you, but whatever they do will feel so much worse and stronger, because you're finally starting to get a little, gumption behind you. And that's when we tend to say things like, I'm leaving you, or I'm done, or, you're going to be sleeping outside or something that there's no way you're going to stick to. And that is a really important part. I went through a boundary setting myself very recently, where when I laid with it for a minute, I went, there is no way I am following through with what my, repercussion would have been. Which was actually my lesson, I realized, because then the whole need for the boundary poofed, and I realized it was the universe showing me that, despite teaching it, you teach what you have to learn. I had done the same thing and made a promise that, this is what I was going to do. And there was no way I could do it. So you adjust that. And that's why I was saying that sometimes when they're tested, you'll realize your boundaries do need to be adjusted, but communicate. You know what? I know it will take you time to learn to meet there. This is what I'm asking now. Be honest with your partner. Or anyone that you're trying to set boundaries with. It's amazing how well people respond to honesty, even if it's uncomfortable honesty. Because deception, so many of us have empathic talents that people feel dishonesty. I prefer to be, I like to call it my graceful vulnerability, but it took me a long time to get here because, like most of us, I hid anything about myself that I considered an imperfection. But being able to be honest about my own struggles and what I'm doing, and the fact that, I'm still going through shadow work. I am every day working on it. And boundaries, I am still, as I said, teach what you have to learn, but I'm still practicing my boundaries. I've reached the point where I am a sovereign and autonomous being and do believe that I deserve that respect. But the practice of it is something I am still getting comfortable with, because as an empath, I don't like to make people upset with me. But I have gotten to the point now where I am able to do so. But telling people how hard it is for you, they'll listen, because at the root of it, and this is another thing that, if you say on the internet, people argue with you, but everybody, and yes, I'm going to go political here, this includes Trump, has a purpose and thinks they're the good guy, to themselves. There is nobody who thinks, oh, I'm such a bastard. Not really, not unless they're coming from a place where they're wounded and then self-deprecating themselves in order to get through it. Yeah, I saw that. Hi, Nate. Actually, I should address that. The bad guy thing is part of protecting that wounded inner child that someone didn't show up for the way they needed to. That was my ex. I have seen it many times. And the good news is it's very, very healable as you start to work through things, because a lot of those, the bad tough guy, it's because there is a beautiful but very vulnerable soul under there. So I'm excited to see your journey. As for boundaries, I want to recap because I like to go about a half hour on it and we're almost there. In order to set a boundary, first figure out what it is you actually want in that situation. What triggers the emotion that is making you say, I need to set a boundary? How are you feeling? And it's often anger, by the way, is a great flag for when you have a place you should have a boundary trampled. If you're feeling that it is unjust and unfair, which the victim and fairness paradigm is a beautiful thing to be able to let go of, to realize the universe is not an attacker, not out to get us. It is just the teacher. But that is how you can help find those places where you're feeling that something is not fair, is at least a place to look to see if you need a boundary. Take everybody else out of it. What do you want from this situation? Then talk to the other person, find out what it is they want from the situation so that you can work out a compromise. If they're like, well, I don't care, I'm doing this anyway, that's where your boundaries come in. Because what are you willing to take? Is it that they, are in the living room for 10 hours a day, blasting really loud music and you can't get any sleep? Well, find out what it is. If they just want to be able to listen to their music, get headphones, or, set a time and say, look, from this to this, I need to sleep. You can have I understand you use your loud music to heal. If you want to listen to that, I am more than willing to let you, as long as I can have this amount of quiet time. Find the places that work for both of you. But then if they keep not being willing to compromise, you have to not only set your boundaries, but follow through on them. And I know it feels like you could lose somebody that maybe you thought was your whole world because they won't compromise. But if they will not listen to your boundaries and at least communicate and try to find a compromise, they're not meant to be in your life. They are at a vibration that you need to leave behind and aren't able to, as long as you are shackling yourself to that rock. But one of the beautiful things is, more often than not, I have seen when people start setting boundaries, it might get a little hairy in the beginning because of egos. But guess what? Everybody grows. I rarely see where somebody gets left behind, for good. I mean, sometimes they leave your life for a while and have to heal and come back. But most people, if they were meant to be in your final story, they will rise to the occasion and surprise you. So we are just about at 9:30 almost, and I like to do the half hour stuff. So I'm ready to open it to questions. Hi. Linda's my unmuting person. There you go.
Awesome. So I especially loved the comment that you made about the difference between how boundaries and shadow work go together.
Right.
In particular, I've recently been doing fuckload of shadow work, and it's been fully kicking my ass. And
I go through phases like that, so I'm with you.
Thank you. Yeah. But it's super interesting to hear how, and the other concept, I guess I sort of had a question about,
Sure.
because I never would have considered myself an empath. And then I did all of my shadow work, and a lot of my shadow work.
Right.
And now everything is triggering. Literally everything is triggering. Like I have OCD, and I'm going to go back to my IOP for like the third time, because it's like, oh, now instead of just thoughts, it's now like urges and other terrifying shit. And it's like, and it completely blindsided me, because I'm like, this can't happen. I've had this nice little safe box of a world. And now, and like, when I feel like me, the world is so much more beautiful. Like I have so much more connection to everything and all of those things. I guess my question is, for lack of a better way of putting it, how long does it take before you feel safe again? Does that make sense?
It does. It does. The first part I want to address is part of why everything gets so more intense is, as you have done you didn't consider yourself an empath because you had yourself closed off in that box to be safe and to feel protected. Very much the way someone with hypersensitivity might avoid all contact. And so by doing that, you were protected, but you were protected the same way psychiatric meds dull an empath's ability. Once you started working through your shadows, you were able to handle more and more, and it opened up for you. It will feel crazy and overwhelming. And I still have moments of that, but once I got rid of the fear paradigm, because I not only know it's part of my growth, but embrace it because I have seen direct evolution, physically, things healing that they say can't be healed. I broke a bone and a week later I'm fine and walking on it. Like my foot is bruised, but that's it. Those things should not be possible, but those have reaffirmed that the craziness stuff that you're talking about and the overwhelming is beneficial. It is teaching me. So to feel safe again is part of the shadow work that I know you've been doing, focus on your fear paradigm, because it's the same. Here's the example. When downloads, you get downloads into your chakras and they buzz. The heart one feels like a heart attack. And were that to happen, when I had the fear paradigm, I would be a wreck and probably diagnosed with a panic disorder. I'm aware now that it is a download. I greet it. I'm happy for it. I breathe slow and deep so that, I don't lose my breath. But once you take the fear out of it, what you're talking about, the overwhelm goes away. Because although the same things are happening, when you don't have fear in it, it doesn't make it painful. It doesn't make it scary. It doesn't make it overwhelming, because you're able to say, oh, that's this. I'm feeling really antsy because that woman next to me is nearly chewing her fingers off, biting her nails. I'm feeling her energy. I know where it's coming from. I'm good. And so by being able to learn where you're getting the things from and just trust that the universe is, I don't want to say training you for greatness. That sounds awful. We're all great. But those of us with the deeper shadows, those of us that suffer more going through it, are to build a strong root system so that our branches can spread and more life can blossom from what we're bringing and we're spreading, and support for others. But you need that strong root system to do it. Healers only become healers because they healed themselves and then show other people that it can be done. I wish I could have answered your question directly on timeline, but your miracles may vary and everybody's different. So my answer would not be yours. But I got through the painful part of what you're talking about, where everything felt so overwhelming, relatively quickly, because I had guides that were kind of talking to me and reassuring me. And it still took about 2 months where I still felt like everything, and it was harder. So again, I don't know if my timeline will relate to yours because we're all different, but at least it what I had is the best I got.
Well, and it's interesting too, because one of the things, and I think you touched on this a little bit, I watched your shadow work talk last night. I think you touched on this a little bit there too, but our shadows are always the thing we don't fucking want them to be. Like
Right.
every time I'm like, oh, it's trauma. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that. And I'm like, I am okay with this being literally anything except this. And then it's that.
Well,
And
that's
so,
why.
like,
That's why you don't want it to be that, because your ego doesn't want you to look at the things that will remove its power from you. Now, I want to put in this, by the way, I don't believe in ego death. I don't believe you ever fully get rid of your ego as long as you're an incarnation. What I do believe is that you can see it as the child it is, because think, it just is needs, survival, what I want. It's a toddler. And when you can relegate it to its role as toddler and go, it's very nice that you want this, but that's not what's best for us. But you're valid and I accept you. And then you can let it go. But if you don't, just like a screaming toddler kicking the back of your seat while you're trying to drive, it can make everything else so much more difficult. Thank you. It was a pleasure. I agree. Balancing soul and ego is the key. It is about what the soul knows. I didn't read all the text, by the way, so if I miss people, I apologize, but I just saw that one pop up. Your higher self, or what I think you're referring to as soul, knows what we need to do. It wrote the story. In fact, I need to clarify this. Our story, because everything always happens, it's instant. There really is no time. Time's an illusion, but we need it to watch the unfolding. Kind of like a videotape has the entire movie on it, but you have to watch it unfold in order to experience it. But our highest self, our fully realized divinity, already existed because we made it to the end. The story then was written backwards to get us there. That's how we have free will. Our free will got us to our divinity, and then our divinity wrote how we were going to experience it happen that was that best outcome. So on a positive note, you're already there. It's just whether or not you are able to see that in yourself yet. Our limitations are what we put on ourselves, and the ego is there so that we can experience it uniquely. If we didn't have our ego, we would all have the same exact experience. And that wouldn't help God know itself. That wouldn't be any fun for us either. So the ego does have its place. The key is not to let it win, take control. Tell us to be fear-based. That's actually probably, with what you were talking about, what I think is a very important thing to point out. Nothing that is of God's source divinity. I tend to not use God because I was polytheistic and Wiccan for many, many years. So I have many gods. So going above that to source, what we all came from. And I totally lost what I was saying. Oh, it's never fear-based. Nothing that is of source is fear. If it's fear, it's the ego. And that is a good way to be able to look at it and go, then it's not real. Now, I'm not saying you don't protect yourself, because you still believe, as I do, we're in a 3D world where like a bullet will hurt us. So it's not that you don't take precautions until you're to the point where you truly do not, I should say this, that the bullet won't hurt you. I'm not there yet, but where I am is to the point that I was on 28 different medications, some of those pills 6 times a day, many of which I was told that if I went off, I would die. As I healed myself, my guides, I was feeling healthier and healthier and healthier, were telling me, okay, at this point, your medicine is hurting you rather than helping you because you no longer have the conditions that they're treating. And I weaned off everything. And now it's a year later and I have taken nothing but a couple vitamins in a year. That's the same thing that can happen just by reaching the point that you're safe. The universe has you. You reach a point of belief where you do get there. But in the meantime, living in 3D reality, as long as you still believe it will affect you, it does. And so this again isn't don't do the things that you need to. You still need to eat until you don't. There are many people that I talk to through the ascension path that fast a lot. Some of them only eat one meal every 4 or 5 days. It is just where they have reached. My intake has gone way, way down. I'm eating probably a third of what I used to eat in a day. And I feel great. I'm healthier than I was as a teenager. It is part of the path. As you break your own programming and your own limits, literally you get superpowers. And who the hell doesn't want superpowers? So I'm rambling. Does anybody else have any questions? Or Nate, if you have any more? Maybe?
I was just going to jump in and just,
Sure.
I agree with what you are saying 100%. Like I felt that on my journey, just talking about the food and the things that I'm doing, the choices that I'm making. There's certain things that society has stated that we're supposed to have or do. And I have adjusted and moved to a new level of that. So the fear base is not there. The trust is there.
Good.
And that awareness of being in tune with my body, knowing that when the messages come in and the
Right.
downloads come in, that gut wrenching feeling in my stomach, that you shouldn't go there, you shouldn't do that, or the pain that's in your heart, or wherever it might come out, but just reading into what those signify,
Right.
rather than automatically thinking, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack, or, my stomach is telling me that this is a nervous,
Right.
fear-based, whatever it is. But knowing that I get my downloads, I get my responses in my stomach. So that's telling me that I should take these chances to move forward rather than be in fear of it. So I don't know. I kind of rambled there for a minute too. And
Nope. So it is all good. And I completely understand, because different people get their intuitive feelings in different ways. But one of the big things with eating that I've noticed on this journey is you get really sensitive to chemicals, to processed crap, for lack of a better word. I was already vegan because it was part of my journey to try to get healthier, lose weight. This was pre-awakening, but where I had turned towards life and said, I want to live now. So luckily I already, because that had been whole food, plant-based vegan, was already eating relatively clean. But when even that, I couldn't handle like a lot of the non-organic stuff. I could taste the chemicals no matter how much I washed it, a lot of the processed things. And I even reached the point that there's a sour aftertaste when there's an ethical issue, as weird as that sounds. Palm oil tends to be one of the biggest ones that sets it off. And I've realized if what I use has fair trade palm oil, it doesn't have the taste. It really, you become your own barometer. When you learn to read the signals that initially seem overwhelming, chaotic, no idea where they're coming from, they're messages. It's just like trying to read, Sanskrit when you've only known English your whole life. So it can be very, very confusing in the beginning. Anybody else?
Yes, I do. So, hi. Your first class triggered me pretty much down to my roots, and I was bawling and I was upset and I was angry. And then like things have happened where over these last couple weeks where I've been able to like heal my inner child more than I thought. Things were triggered.
Right.
So thank you for triggering me.
That's not something you usually hear, but I do understand exactly what you mean, because without that triggering, you can't bring it up to heal it. So
that is true. And it was just, when you need to do something, but it's like,
I do.
It's just like you said it just right. And it was like, what? And then boom, I just was in tears and I was upset. And it was just like one thing was happening after another. But then I did the family constellation and I just went boom.
Beautiful.
And I didn't really hit rock bottom, but I felt like I had. But so now it's just kind of, I'm climbing back out of
I was going to say, you need to clear away all that debris and, oh no, I don't know that my camera's off. Hold on. Okay. It doesn't seem to want to fix, but.
That's all right.
Oh, there we go. Yay. No, I didn't know. I must have accidentally hit it. But you need to, it's like the forest fire. If all the old doesn't get burned out, the beautiful new lush forest won't grow. And so I'm not saying I'm glad that it brought you to the bottom to clear everything out, because obviously, the discomfort of that, but I am glad for the part in your journey. And thank you so much for letting me know that it helped you, because that is always, you never know who you've managed to help or not, but it's very affirming in this journey. So thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome. And Nate, trust me, I know it's hard. Some days I'm just like, I feel like I'm going like this, but it's just like, I sit down and take a minute, even if it's just a minute, to meditate and say, why am I on this path? And then I've done this trick in my mind. It's like, hey, do you want this? Do you want a better life? Or do you want to go back to what you were? Because back to where you were really wasn't happy at all. So that's the trick. And it's like, hey, weigh them. Which one's better right now?
That is a beautiful advice. My experience that I use similarly is when I was 340 pounds and really sick. And I was like, wow, cooking for, every meal of the day, a whole food plant-based diet sounds awfully hard. And then it kind of clicked my life is pretty fucking hard. So I have a choice of which hard I prefer. And I wanted the hard that gave me the chance to live, because I had just gotten with a wonderful partner and actually wanted to and didn't want to check out, which for the 10 years prior, I wasn't trying to actively kill myself, but there were many times I had kind of wished, and I definitely wasn't taking care of myself because I just wanted to not be.
Yeah.
Once I did want to be and want that life, it was actually a really easy choice between which difficult do I want.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So.
Between,
thank you.
sorry, if I could just jump in.
Please do.
Between, one, thank you for the advice, Willow. I really appreciate it. I guess my other question, Trina, because this has been something that's really, really been weighing on me, is when you open up to this stuff, it feels like what got the loudest is my scariest shit. Is the things that, like, there's literally a part of me that is terrified that I'm destined to be like an awful person or things like that. How do you, because what I'm starting to realize is that what I thought was the universe talking to me was my illness. So how do you balance that? Does that make sense?
Let me address that. If you're talking like schizophrenia, it is still the universe talking to you, but through the lens of your own trauma. So you are twisting and distorting what you're getting based on fear. Have talked to other people who have had that diagnosis, and it's not that they weren't getting messages, but when you're getting a message and your own lens is filled with conspiracy theories, everybody's out to get me, men, are microchipping my brain and all these things, the messages are going to come through as if they are scary, fear-based. And I knew someone who believed that the aliens were like farming us or something because of his own lens. Again, if it is fear-based, it is not of God. It is not of source. It's not the true message. But the fact that you're feeling all of these things, you are an empath. You are getting the messages, but you need to work through the fear part. Now, some of those trauma I can feel are very deep. And this is not something for a public forum, but by all means, reach out to me. And even if it's just like a couple Facebook messages here and there, I would be glad to help guide you some, because I can feel it. And it's not something that you're going to want to do alone, because you're going to self-flagellate yourself into a puddle of self-blame that will not help you. So, as I said, reach out in a message afterwards, even if it's just through text, because you are empathic. You do feel it. And from what you're saying, you get messages. You are primed once you can heal yourself to be able to heal other people. And I get the feeling that that really resonates with you, because you don't want anyone else to suffer the way you do. So we will get you there.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Anyone else? So take Nate off the hot seat for a minute.
I wanted to just say that one of the things that worked for me as I was going through my shadow work, and I don't know if it is something that worked for me, but an observation over the time that I've gone through this spiritual journey is that it's a spiral, right? So, and I think we talked about this. So it's all the shit, all the fucking traumas, all of it, they're still there.
Mhm.
It's just how are we reacting to them? How are we working through them? And for me, it's, you know, it might show up in one way, it might show up in this job, or it might show up in this child or this person at the store,
Right.
however it is. But I get to stop and I get to reflect and use those spots in my body that I'm feeling the things. I get to reflect on those, and I get to I get to celebrate on how fast I work through them. And that is my
Yes.
goal now, is how fast do I get to turn through this? It's dark, there's shadows.
It's so cute that you
I
give yourself stickers.
I'm gonna give
You can
myself a
tell
gold
you're a
star.
special
It's
ed
part of being a teacher, right? Like I get to, it's a challenge. It's like, how fast do I get to move through this? I recognize it. And you know, just that fast in my brain, it's like, okay, last time this came up for me, it took me
I want to address the spirals. What I have noticed is you get progressively more difficult. And the example I like to use is I was very arachnophobic. Like little tiny spider, I would freak out. Now I'm to the point where I'm probably okay with up to about yay spider. And I'll even talk to them. You know, hey, you stay there, I'm good. You know, but another spiral would be spider. And I'm not so sure how I would do with spider. Each spiral does get progressively more difficult. However, you do get through it eventually. I have had a couple topics come up for me recently, one of which is letting my partner go. Complete autonomous freedom for each of us. It doesn't mean we're going to go run out and find other partners, but I had to let go of my codependency and then gain the freedom myself that if I meet somebody I click with and that's something we want to do, we can without it hurting the other person. That for me was a big spider, a very big spider. Here's the thing, as it came up where there was a possibility after the big spider, like 2 days later, I was completely okay. Not only okay, but fine, and seeing how you can't show up for the other person. Yes, it is a big spider. Can't show up for the other person honestly, unless you have full autonomous freedom to do so. If you feel you are still under an obligation, whether they impose it or you impose it, you are not honestly showing up completely for that other person. But that was a higher spiral, and to hit it again and go, you know what, I'm good. Now, I don't know if I'm clear because nothing's ever happened yet where it really big spider has been tested, but I think I am. I genuinely feel good about it, but I have had other things where I got what I like to call the bonus spiral. The universe puts it into your awareness again, and you realize you have no negative reaction to it at all. And that is when you realize you're free of whatever that trauma was that had you auto-programmed, had you doing things a certain way. So different things, depending on the spirals you're working, you do get to completely let go of them, but you don't know you have until it's fully tested and you realize you're fine.
I like a little celebration idea.
and I get to get my sticker and celebrate.
Yay, yes, you get your sticker.
We'll
Do you
give
have a like
everybody
fastest
stickers.
shadow work sticker?
And I need to create something that's going to be
Mhm.
my Etsy store or whatever it is. I don't
Oh,
know.
you
Mark
should
it.
have, great job on your shadow work, good boundaries with thumbs up. Is there any other questions? Maybe.
I asked a question in the chat that was like, how do you know if you're an empath?
I believe that if you're asking, you are.
Okay.
People don't even think about being an empath unless it resonates with you on some level. But one of the big, if you're an unhealed empath, which unless you've worked on it, you most likely would be.
I am. I'm definitely unhealed if I am.
You tend to think that if that is one of the signs you're an empath, is it seems like everybody's lying. Everything they say doesn't match how you know they feel. I'm fine, even with a smile, but you can feel they are not fine. And you feel that they're deliberately misleading you. Now, I want to point out that when you feel that way, they're not deliberately misleading you. It's usually they think they are fine, but their own traumas, their own fears, their own wanting to put the best foot forward for you. Maybe they don't want to make you feel bad for them. You know, they're tired of people pitying them. So they will say they are fine. All of these things, but you can sense, and it was really hard for me as a child, that the words that come out of people's mouth more often than not do not match how they feel to you, what you're feeling from them. And that is a really good sign that you at least, you know, feel that energy. And that is what being an empath is.
True.
And
I
yes,
think I
or
blocked
that the universe is
it
out
for
to
a
get
long
you. I just
time.
saw that comment. The universe is never out to get you, but I felt that way immensely for many decades. The universe does put pressure where we need to go and learn and what we need to look at. It was hard for me to accept with some of the horrific things I have gone through in my life, that was the minimum amount of pressure the universe had to give. But it turns out it was, because I was really stuck and mired in the quicksand and didn't, you know, was afraid of what any change would mean. Because we will pick something that is familiar and horrible over something unknown, even when it has great potential. And so the universe starts with just a little nudge. The one I like is, you know, my neck's been bothering me a little. I should probably go to the chiropractor. 3 months later, more and more keeps happening. And finally, you get in a car accident that forces you to go to the chiropractor because you needed to do it. And the universe kept giving you signs, do this, go to the car, and you didn't. And it's not that the universe is out to punish you. Maybe you're going to marry the chiropractor. Who knows? Like, there's some reason that it was important that you did it. And the universe will keep pushing you until you do. But it is never an attack. Yes, another sign you need a chiropractor. That's great. But the universe pushes us only as much as needed. It's never more force than is needed. Even though it can feel heavy-handed, it really isn't. If it's heavy-handed, it means you're not moving very easily and you're making the universe push harder. What we like to use in order to determine how we're like not going in the wrong direction is what we call the resistances. We take 2 resistances. You know, we go to do something and we go to, say, book a room at a hotel, and the website suddenly like restarts and we have to put our stuff back in. That's 1 strike. We'll test it again just to see. And if it happens again, then that's the universe telling us that would not have been a good stay. That is not where we were supposed to go. Because what we've discovered is, can you force your way through? Of course you can. And just like Google, when you miss your turn, it'll say recalculating and it'll take you around, you know, to get you back to wherever it is you needed to be. But the more you keep deliberately missing your turns, the harder and harder the route back becomes. And so it has to push harder to say, hey, dumbass, I told you to turn. So.
I'm sorry, that made me laugh.
That's okay.
Because honestly, I think the universe probably has said that to me a few times.
Believe me, I had a meme that was like the statue of the face palming angel, and it was what my, you know, my guides must look like. So I get it.
My guardian angel is always having her hand in her head and shaking her head at all times, I swear.
Yeah, I remember distinctly a year ago with Willow, and I wasn't as familiar with messages from higher self or whatever. And she says, I think, because she just got her Moldavite, and then she was like, why is this happening? And then she heard a voice say, you're wearing Moldavite, dumbass. And I was like,
I get it.
I was like, no, I don't think the higher self would talk to you that way. Oh, sure enough, she does.
Yes. Yes. Let me tell you my story with that. I thought the same thing. Channeling dimensional beings, my guides, and I was really surprised to find out, first of all, they don't actually get exasperated with where we are because they know where we are is exactly where we need to be. But they do have a sense of humor. And I have gotten all sorts of little, amusing comments and things that was more like watching, Firefly, like a bunch of space cowboys with smart ass stuff. And I'm like, some reason I thought dimensional beings would be more regal and, proper, but they're seen through my lens, just like a fear-based lens can make them fear-based. I guess I'm comical, and my guides come through and give me comedy occasionally, usually in the ways that make me go, yeah, I know, I feel like a dumbass, thanks. But those are couching it in humor that way. I'm sure they know makes me more receptive to it. It's why comedians can get away with talking about all the social ills, because if they're making you laugh at the same time, they can get away with saying a lot of things that, other people would say and would cause arguments.
Yeah, I think they do. They go through our lens and they're filtered through our translation, right? So they speak our own language and our own sense of humor and our own. And so, yeah, they're gonna, if you do talk that way, they will talk to you that way.
Yes. One of the things that happened early on in my channeling was they would be trying to rack my brain to find the right word and the right way to say it, because although they had my knowledge, they didn't have my mannerism the same way. And so some of the things that were more, I can't think of the word, but, like sayings that we use all the time that aren't literal translations. Took longer for them to get used to it and to start to use. In the beginning, there was very little, catchphrases and things. And I'm always quoting movies and stuff. So it was not the way I normally talk.
I think this is great. You guys, is there anybody else who has any other comments? I think there was a lot that we just went through, wrapping it all together. I'm excited. I've got some thoughts, some things that have come to me that I'm going to post in the group, some assignments for
I'm not doing them.
What's that? You're not doing?
I'm not doing the assignments.
Come on. Ashley, did you want to share something?
Yeah, I guess more or less just a more question of resources, I guess, the assignments and stuff like that, because this isn't 100% new to me, but I really haven't really committed to 100% healing and growing and diving in as where I've been much more recently. And it's like, I know like some of the terminologies and stuff like that, like where there's just so much out there, and like, where do you start? Like I don't know, looking at you guys, I guess, as mentors to kind of point myself for the right direction of where to start that healing, start the growth, start getting rid of that trauma and the toxicity.
My personal, it depends on which path resonates with you, because again, I like to say your miles may vary, but for me, because I was channeling, I found a lot of information and comfort in a lot of the other channelers. Ones in particular to look for would be Bashar, Bashar. Seth is another one. You'd have to put, Seth's a relatively common name, but it is a dimensional being and he's channeled. And Cryon is another good one, Kryon. But that's for my personal path. I also did get a lot of resource. Thank you, Linda. Through, I had been raised pagan and Jewish. My dad was Wiccan. And then when I was a young adult, I had a tradition for a while and everything. So also the pagan witchcraft path. But that I don't know who's actually doing things like shadow work and everything through that now. So you guys may actually be a better resource. And of course I have my own stuff. But you're already here for those classes. So
Thank you. That helped.
So Ashley, I'll reach out to you. We can even chat a little bit tomorrow, and I'll explain a little bit about what we're doing with the academy and where all those classes and things are going to be. So it's a little bit different than the messenger group that you're in. And we can have that chat.
Perfect.
And I added Seth in there, and Chiron I wasn't able to pull up really quick.
okay.
I think that was the third one that you said, right?
Yep, Cryon.
I love Cryon. Yeah.
They're channeled by multiple people. The one in particular that resonated with me multiple times early in my journey is a Polish woman, actually, that because like Bashar is only channeled by Daryl Anka. I'm not sure about Seth, but Cryon, to the best of my knowledge, has, you know, half a dozen or so people who channel them.
Phoenix, do you have a link?
For Cryon, let me go find it.
It's just bringing up like a bunch of ads and stuff. It's
Oh, gotcha.
so I'm not gonna
Actually, I'll see if I
forward
can.
through that right now. I know I have a bookmark somewhere, one that I've used, followed. I will copy this, the links into the messenger group, into the,
There you go. Lee Carroll, by the way, is the most famous of the Cryon channels.
thank you. I
So
can't remember who it was.
Yes, I couldn't remember his name, and here he is, right here in my search. That's who I have heard.
Yeah.
He has a lot, like a
a
whole book,
lot of it,
and
yes.
then he does them regularly too.
I am going to go ahead and close, stop the recording. So we are just about 10 after 8. So I want to make sure that
Sure.
we respect everybody's time. I'm just going to end the recording. And then if you guys have any other questions, we can kind of follow
Okay.
up at
Yep.
the end. So thank you so much. I, what was I going to say? We have another class next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And we'll use the same Zoom link for those of you that want to join.
Great.
And check out what we've got going on our on our Facebook page. We've got a couple other teachers and healers that are going to be joining us. We have breath work. We've got an inner child class that's coming up, along with everything that Trina is sharing with us. So
And a full moon woo gathering.
yes,
Nice.
probably online for those of you. Oh, full moon. Yes. And new moon sound math at the end of the month. So I'm going to end now.
There you go.
Stop recording.